Hello, everyone, on behalf of the entire Vision project consortium team. Welcome to this workshop today. The workshop is about our current results of the project, about the future of teaching creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurship. It's Erasmus Plus funded project. And yeah, what is it about? What we actually wanted or want to do in this 2 years project is to try, with the help of stakeholders all around the world, to envision how the future of teaching will be, but specifically for the domains creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurship. And who are the project partners? There we have a very diverse group. We have startups in our team. We have big enterprises. We have NGOs, universities, different institutes, and yes, we have a very interesting group. Some of them are here today. I will show you later who is here. But just talking about the project, so to get you so to say up to date, at which stage we are currently now. We started by creating an interview guideline and interviewing 130 different stakeholders. And with these interviews, where we asked about what they think the future will be, what the trends will be, and so on and so forth, we conducted several internal workshops with the project partners that I've shown you before, and we tried to condense and structure the insights we got from these interviews. And in a second step, we also asked people from the outside to participate in similar workshops to consolidate these insights and this structuring we have conducted. And out of those results, our book team, as I call them, tried to analyze the findings and structure it in a manner that it could be helpful for the teachers to read, and also for other audience to read. And what is the current outcome of this analysis and structure is a draft of our vision book that you can see here in the slides. And this book will be in the focus today, and later Olga and Kiki will introduce it and go through it. Besides the book, the outcomes of the project are also webinars and podcasts that will also be conducted in the next months. Some articles, some of them already published, and hopefully also a final conference in Barcelona if the situation will improve with the COVID pandemic. And yes, so this is just the point where we are in the project, and this book will be, as I said, in the focus today. And yeah, what precisely are we doing with this book today? Yeah, first of all, we want to try to condense all the findings we had and present it to you. And as the book is structured, we tried also to structure our findings and present them to you. And we would like to hear also what you think about these results we had. And obviously, by doing this, we would like also to hear about your feedback and ideas. And we'll go more into detail in what we are interested in. But this is so to say the goal of today's workshop. And yeah, who is here today from the Vision Consortium? So it's myself, Michele, on the bottom left. Then there is Kyriaki from ESADE, Olga in Australia right now, and Lucia also from ISPIM, Anna Bessant also from ISPIM, and I think also I saw Karina in the participant list here, also Karina from Lufthansa Systems. Apologize if I forgot someone from the Vision project, but I think that's who is here today. And yeah, I will pass then later the stage to Kyriaki, that will, in the first part of the workshop, guide through the first part of the book, and then she will pass over to Olga, introducing the second part of the book. And throughout this introduction, we are open to hear, to get questions and already to get feedback. In case we have time at the end of the session, we would like also to have a brain writing session where we would like to all work on a workspace and entering the things in text in a more silent phase. And finally, if we have time, a short wrap up and follow up and talking what are the next steps. So yeah, that's from my side. Kyriaki, if you would like, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Michele, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. As Michele said, what we would like to do today is share with you the working output of our research project, and one of the first outputs is this book entitled "Envisioning the Future of Learning for Creativity, Innovation, Entrepreneurship." So the book is still in progress. So and what I'll be sharing is the general structure and format of the book, and distill some of the main findings with the purpose of receiving your feedback. So please feel free to interrupt us while we're talking. Next slide, please. So, the book talks about the future of education in general, but we are focusing specifically on creativity, innovation, entrepreneurship. And because we see from, especially from the policy arena, that these three skills or competencies are becoming more and more critical and important in the future of work. And so the European Commission in particular has several programs designed to support learning for creativity, innovation, entrepreneurship. And out of those programs, our project is funded. But then more specifically, we are thinking about the future. I think it's important to note that the way we, the empirical data that informs our work has come out from conversations with more than 120, I think it was in total in the end, 130 experts around the world, interviews, but then also workshops using the methodology of Future Agenda and Tim Jones. And out of those workshops, we've distilled these findings. Next slide, please. So what more or less everyone was telling us is that things are changing, and things are already, there's a lot of evidence that a lot of organizations that are leading the change. And these changes are kind of pushing against the very pillars and foundations of the modern higher education system. So we've organized these changes or shifts in three categories. And I think it's important to note that we're still debating ourselves about whether we've categorized these shifts correctly or whether we're naming them correctly. So if you have any feedback on that, I really appreciate it. So very briefly, what was happening now, especially in this area of creativity, innovation, entrepreneurship, is that it's challenging the roles, the traditional roles of the teacher and student, from the teacher being a lecturer and a subject expert is becoming more a facilitator, a coach, then the student is becoming more actively involved in their learning journey. Lecture halls and classrooms with fixed sittings are not good enough to support a more flexible environment where learning happens, and it happens inside outside academic walls. Subject matter, we see that there's a tendency towards a more multidisciplinarity and cross sector learning, challenge driven. Then we also see shifts in the kind of modes of learning, more towards teamwork and collaborative styles of learning, where the learner interacts with technologies, and the journey is more iterative and experimental than linear. And all these changes have kind of also impact the results one expects from the learning experience. Instead of, for example, we see in a lot of innovation courses, instead of having papers or exams, students have to have prototypes and business plans. There's a lot more emphasis on competencies and skills, and that the final result is affects and hopefully affects society at large. And of course, because the process is iterative, failure is also encouraged, which just completely goes against this idea of like midterm exams, and that if you fail in the midterms, then you're definitely not going to have an A. So there's a much more kind of emphasis on final outputs and self-reflection and the journey as a whole versus what happens in the middle. Next slide, please. And I'll now speed up a little bit. So what we are doing in the book is then deep diving into each of these shifts with the details and what we mean. Next slide, please. And we're trying to also include a lot of illustrations to represent the changes that a lot of the experts are telling us about. And this image is about changing the roles of the teachers and the students. Next slide. And this is about the spaces of learning. So instead of lecture halls and classrooms, we see a lot more now flexible spaces where students can work in teams and interact or move things around. And then next slide. And then also the subject matter. And just to emphasize that we're not saying that, learning a specific discipline is dead. Actually, we do think that it's still important to have some expertise and disciplinary based education. However, like maybe the last 2 years of learning, it's important these days to be able to work with others in order to tackle like real societal challenges. Next slide. I think here, Olga will jump in, I think, in this slide, but I think just to finish is that what we are also trying to do is bring all this together, and we're still kind of working towards mapping the landscape of learning with this kind of shifts. I don't know if I should ask now, Olga, if they have questions, or should we continue? Please feel free to interrupt.
Yeah, let's see. I mean, if anyone is raising a hand or has a comment.
Okay, so then
we'll continue, but please feel free to pop up your questions, and we'll have a collaborative part after all. So thank you, Kyriaki. And as we mentioned, so this book somehow, actually it's an open access book, and to some extent, sorry. Franz, go ahead with your question first.
Yes, I have a question. So I'm very much interested in your work, in Vision Project, etc. My question is, do you also focus on hybrid teams? So that's partly digital, partly on campus. And especially I'm struggling with organizing creativity sessions for hybrid teams. So do you
in a way,
that as well?
Yeah, it's part of the interviews. So we do capture that somehow in tools and also in some of the shifts. So shifts in technologies and in spaces will represent it. And somehow the space is changing from basically face-to-face to online or hybrid learning environments. So that's one of the shifts, and I will explain how we're trying to approach those. And then also shifts in tools will capture shifts in different types of technologies that we are trying to use in the educational space. And so I'll continue, but we can come back to that because it's a very relevant question and super important, actually. So if you can go to the next slide.
There is another question regarding how we think grading should be dealt with.
That's well, we don't obviously like what we're trying to do with this book is not to provide one specific answer, but capture different practices that we see around the world. So what we see in terms of grading, for instance, you see in the learning results, which is the third part of the shifts, it's named evaluation. So here we're trying to shift the different changes in terms of what does it mean to actually grade lifelong learners. Should it be a formative assessment or summative assessment, meaning do we evaluate them in real time or after we obtain the result of the course? So yeah, we will try to capture, and we're capturing that in the first shift, and we will also explain different tools that we are trying to kind of collect to help you, for instance, redesign your own courses. And that's basically the goal somehow of the second part of the book. So if the first one is capturing all the shifts, and here you have the summary of them, teacher, student, spaces, subject matter. The second one tries to kind of come up with, okay, so me as an educator, whether I'm in the corporate space or in the higher educational institutions, so what do I do? Like which kind of tools and methods should I actually use to help me rethink the way I teach? And if we go to the next slide, I don't see any more questions. So yeah, like you only see, and I'm sorry, it's very, very small in that particular table, but what you would see here, it's basically the same structure. So different shifts on the page, and then on the right, you'll see different methods. And so these methods and toolkits, it's not something we're trying to invent because there are so many amazing things that exist out there. And I'm sure many of you already are coming up with new frameworks or new different toolkits. So what we try to do is to kind of identify some of the exemplary practices and tools that I use to kind of help us think about those elements. So for instance, subject matter, if we look at that, it will be coming to multidisciplinarity, but how we do that, we see lots of shifts to problem-based learning, for instance, challenge-based learning, crowdsourcing, open innovation. If we, for instance, go into evaluation, we picked up a few elements that exist and that put together by the European Commission, like EPIC, or for instance, Minerva in the US is using this framework of habits of minds, where, for instance, you do not evaluate students until the very end of their curriculum, but you make the students to reflect on different skills and tools that they are using. So the students will have to reflect on different skills that they are trying to learn over time. And so you can see here some of the examples, and we're still collecting them. So if you feel like, okay, I'm working on that amazing toolkit, or I'm actually part of using that specific method, and you want it to be referenced in this open access book that you will be able to use in the future, please come back to us and we will be happy to include those elements, because in the way they're transversal and we would like to reference as many as we can so it can be useful for the community. So that's somehow the element and the objective of the tools. And the way we think about that, I just present quickly the slide after and then take a question from Franz. Yeah, so basically, as I said, these tools, obviously, we can't separate them, as we will use some tools for teacher and some tools for students and then some methods for subject matter. They're all cross-related. And so we're using this idea of Tangrams, and our visual designer, Irma, came up with that idea. So kind of trying to represent everything as different pieces of these Tangrams and then create different shapes around that. So if, for instance, just as an example, not a real example, but on the slide after you will see an example of a cat or a dog or something else. So basically how all these elements can be somehow built together So we can provide different umbrella of tools or methods that you can use as a practitioner, as an academic, as a teacher, to actually think how would you improve your way of teaching creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurship. So this is part 2. I'll pause here before I talk quickly about the third one, and maybe we can take a question from France.
Yeah, Heike also had a question.
Okay, whoever wants to go first.
Sorry, sorry for the noise, by the way. I have a construction site nearby and they don't seem to be quiet right now. Actually, I have 2 questions. One at one time in terms of the grading and the evaluation, because I feel like I am a teacher and I'm always like, feel like as soon as I grade that it's inherently already competitive. So this collaboration part is there's always competition. When you grade, when you evaluate, there's always competition. And that is something that is still kind of ingrained in my students, so that they are just so super focused on their grades that they don't really like go for the actual purpose of like what they learn and what they can learn and what they should learn. And then the second, and I was wondering if you had any experiences with that, how to solve that. And then the second question is also in terms of institutions, how, if you come up with new innovative ways of like teaching or whatever, how to deal with, you know, management in a way as well, to be open for these new kind of ways. Because when you're at a university, you kind of have to stick, for example, to like the grading system or whatever, and how this can then be established at some point into a curriculum. Like, yeah.
Kyriaki or Karina, do you want to start before I jump in?
I can give the floor to Karina if she wants first, and then I can jump in.
No, go ahead, Kyriaki.
All right. So, I mean, this is a very, very critical question you raised, Heike, because I think the question of evaluation is also about question about measuring learning and how do you measure that the students ended up being more creative or more innovative, for example, after taking your course. And then, of course, as we said before, like everything that we have, all the shifts that we're pointing out really push against the current infrastructure, no? And we find that a lot of higher education institutions are not prepared for the kinds of changes that, unless they are the Minervas and others that are leading this, it's very hard to introduce. Just a small note on the evaluation that I'm teaching a course that is based on teamwork, and I think 75% of the students' grade, or even 75% of the grades is based on the team result, so on the final prototype, and then a smaller one on their personal contribution, and then a smaller one on a team evaluation, so that their teammates evaluate people. So then maybe it's not 70%, maybe I think it's like 60% on everyone's effort, and then so forth. So in this way, they know that they have to work together because the output is measured accordingly. I'll stop here and see if Olga and Karina want to jump in.
Yeah, I can jump in just supporting what you just said, and basically the shifts that we're describing in the book, and that we described is more about group work and teamwork. And in my teaching, I definitely try to combine both. So it's a group effort, and they come up with prototypes as part of their teams. And actually, I see, because Heike, you're asking for the competition or how to avoid competition within the group. And actually, what I see is the groups actually asking for more collaboration, not only team internally, but they ask how can they even better collaborate as a whole team. And this is definitely a shift that I see compared to previous courses where you were more, which were more about individual grades and assignments. So now it's about teamwork, and they really appreciate it to work as a team and to come up with something tangible and with their prototypes. But on top of this, they're also asking how to collaborate even with the other teams. So they're even asking for leaving that stage of competition. But I agree with Kyriaki that you still want to emphasize or want to make sure that you also entice individual reflection. So I also always come up with this individual reflection report, which is written individually at the end of each course. And this links to what Olga mentioned, to this habit and mind reflection, that everyone individually should reflect what they have learned. So it's not really about the outcome itself that is graded, but about what they have learned and how they're able to reflect it to their current situation, be it their own life or be it their work. So how they are capable of reflecting the learning. And this is basically all coming together. And this is how I'm using it as part of my teaching.
And in a nutshell, there is no one size fits all. So what we see more and more is basically this customized education and customized learning. In a way, we would need to find a way to actually ensure that we accommodate learning preferences of different types of individuals by combining somehow individual learning and the group learning. And that's somehow what we need to capture. And obviously, we are not even arguing that this book provides answers. It will just provide some examples or methods that you would be able to use to do it. I think we have another question from France. Yes. France? Yeah.
Sorry, this was still the same question, so I probably should lower my hand.
No worries. Sorry for that.
I'm interested in this hybrid stuff because and creativity and hybrid forms, and because I'm involved in challenge-based learning and then indeed in international teams or global teams. It's pretty difficult to do creativity stuff in virtual or hybrid forms.
Yeah, there are definitely new challenges that arise when we try to ensure the blended learning format. And what does it even mean, the effective learning environment in terms of blended education? So we're trying to capture that. Definitely, it wasn't the focus of this project to some extent, but we would love to talk to you more and actually see what are your best practices and how we can obviously share whatever we've collected through during the interviews in there.
Let's wait and see. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. No worries. So what I'll do now very quickly is just to provide you one of the examples of what does it mean, what we're trying to do in the third part of the book. And then we can see if there are any questions or have a general discussion. So if we just go to the next slide. So yeah, basically the first part, as we were saying, it's capturing all the shifts and changes, and most of the shifts and changes I think you are already experiencing in your line of work. Then the second one is basically this learning journey. How do we represent it using different tangrams? And the third one is just to provide you with the examples. So basically trying to capture cases that we've collected around the world while doing this research, coming from different types. So not necessarily just capturing things that we see in the higher educational institutional environment, but also looking into edtech. So we have so many different startups, different institutions that start to emerge and provide alternative forms of education. So how can we use them? How we can learn from them also within the traditional higher educational space? So that will be the second part. And then the third part, bunch of cases will be around corporate education and also lifelong learning, obviously, trying to also see what are other elements that we can use from the corporate space, but also different associations that we see around the world. So again, here an invitation, if you see like you have an amazing case and you want to share it with us, we would love to discuss it with you. And the way we are trying to analyze these cases and represent them is to kind of bring them across different cases, across different shifts and tools that we are capturing in the book. So if we just go to the next slide, and it will be the final one, is for instance, like let's go to this case of Minerva that we mentioned, which is the Catch school in the US. So we are going back to our shifts that Kyriaki presented to you at the beginning, and we're trying to see, okay, so each case that we see, how is it positioned across those shifts? Is it somehow kind of radically changing the notion of teachers and students and subject matters, or is it somehow in the beginning of the journey? So you can somehow position on how your institution also is positioned in comparison to those cases that we presented here, and you can start to see, okay, so what is my starting point? How can I orient my teaching? What are the elements that I can improve? And then how I can also, if we go back to the question from Heike, how I can go back to my institution then and also discuss with them, okay, so what are the elements that we're already doing in a proper way? And what are the elements that perhaps I'm missing if we want to achieve that certain impact or outcomes? So you can have this open discussion with different places and environments. So this is from us. Again, this is an open access book, still work in progress. So please feel free to reach out. We will be very, very happy to talk to you.
Michele, maybe we should put the slide where we, the first slide that Olga presented, with the summary of the shifts and the tools, one before. Yeah, just put this there. I mean, because I think maybe we'll just give people a couple of some time to look at this and see if they have any specific questions. Or do you agree? Do you all agree about these changes that we think that are happening, especially when it comes to teaching and coaching innovation? That of course are changes that reflect, we think, a more general trend in the future of education. So we are very much keen on seeing if you have any comments or reflections there. Otherwise, we can move forward. I know there's a question about the Wonder Woman who did the graphic design of the book. Her name is Irma, and her details will be on the book. You can reach out, or you can reach out to me, and I'll be happy to give you her email.
But we're keeping her for ourselves.
Yeah, so not until we finish the book with, yeah, which is so Benoit, you have a question. Do you want to just say it out loud?
Yes, thank you, and thank you for the initiative, which is really interesting. The graph seems to highlight that there is an ideal, the radar graph you shown a few minutes ago, there is an ideal case where we fit all the boxes. But at the same time, I would challenge that and say that, as put in my questions, it's a function of the audience you're facing, the context in which you're operating, and the objective you're trying to achieve. So could you maybe develop that a bit or discuss that?
Yes, thank you so much. Very, very interesting question, and a critical one. And I think this is what we are trying to capture when Olga pointed the graphs, and maybe Michele, you can show the dog and the cat that there's no one way of putting all these pieces together. And I think you're absolutely right. It does depend on the context, on the resources, on the infrastructures of different organizations, how they end up putting together these shifts, and how they end up in a way embodying the changes that are happening. I don't know, Olga, if you wanted to add anything, or Karina, on that.
No, I mean, that's, I think you've captured it beautifully. I mean, in a way, yes, it's just to give you some examples. We're not claiming that we'll be able to actually address all the shifts within one program, within one institution, but it's more a tool for reflection to see where we stand and what do we want to improve. And I also believe that not all the shifts will be relevant in all places. So it's more like a cherry picking approach in a way. You would have to adjust and see what works for you in your particular case. And maybe there are some elements that you already excel at, and some others you have to improve.
And really, I would suggest to make the link with entrepreneurship education, because I see the innovation community going now through what the entrepreneurship community has been through 10 years ago, of completely rethinking the education of this field, and we see the same questions: evaluation, group work, active learning, etc. So let's make sure we leverage on that and go further. But thanks a lot.
Thank you. Peter, do you want to say your question out loud?
Yeah, hi. Thanks a million. Sorry, and it's a fascinating topic, and so many of us are engaged in trying to embed the skills and tools and mindset into our student body. So I'm just sort of wondering about your target range. I know I may have missed this from the beginning, and someone has helpfully shared the website, which seems to have some great stuff on it. But who are you thinking of? Are you thinking of a specific audience, undergrad or postgrad, or?
I think you are our target audience. In a way, what we wanted to do is provide a toolkit to those that are working in the field of learning or teaching for future entrepreneurs or innovators to understand, and even just to give them a better way to think about the challenges they're facing in designing their courses, because indeed, you know, entrepreneurship education or innovation education has been dealing with these shifts for a while. So I think what our hope is that it will help educators located in higher education, firstly, I think, and then secondly, companies as well, and industry that are aiming to retrain their employees. Olga, Karina, do you wanna?
I think you beautifully captured that. So yeah, in a way, we do not focus on specific level of education here, because you would write 10 different books for each level somehow. But yeah, in a way, it's more what can we bring together to somehow help different educators also approach their transformational journeys when they are thinking of refurbishing their courses or training material.
Thank you.
Can I go ahead? Sorry. I was just wondering, I think I forgot before to say thank you one more time. It's really very inspirational what you presented. And I was just wondering, as you know, like the theme of this ISPIM, and I'm also more in the field of sustainability, if you came across some examples of more like, like tools that maybe foster critical thinking in innovation processes, and or like in terms of like going through, you know, having a enterprise or starting a startup or something like that, that can foster that or that can support that, because I feel like this is still kind of a big issue that we have, that there's always like students know how innovation works and they know what it is, and they are very well trained in creating new stuff and being creative, but like they are not so well trained, I feel like, in then critically thinking about what they produced and what the effects of what they produced will be.
Yeah, very good question, Heike. And actually, you know, one of the things that one of the overall umbrellas as a shift that people identified is a shift towards more kind of experiential, immersive ways of learning that tackles real life challenges. So the kind of challenge-driven education, in a way, that aims to have a positive social impact, were highlighted as kind of an overall horizontal, you would say, wave where all these shifts are happening, where the landscape is shifting. And in a way, and what we also discover is that all these changes really support learning that is aiming towards results that are more sustainable with kind of and closer to addressing sustainability questions. Actually, Olga and I are working on a paper. I don't know if Olga, we want to say that outcome of also the Vision project.
Yeah, in a way, I mean, I completely agree. And there are examples of kind of learning starting to become more sustainable, trying to kind of work towards different ways on how to address that. And again, there is no one single approach that will work. I think there will be a large amount of different things that will work in different contexts. Yeah, if we go back to this experiential learning notion, like what we see, for instance, within the experiential learning theory, I mean, somehow we focused on the notion of experience so far, which is more extreme, like emotions, how to provoke different types of criticism in education, or on the other hand, something which is more, we will just place students outside of the educational system and we see what happens. And we see now more and more of somehow hybrid approaches emerging, like challenge-based learning or problem-based learning, where we kind of trying to create hybrids of basically providing them and still using the traditional educational systems, but then creating more awareness, bringing the industry in the classroom, trying to connect them, or even tackle the problems that industry pre-identified and kind of working with students. So a large amount of different tools and techniques that are starting to be out there with sustainability explicitly present. And I mean, you can define sustainable in education from many different levels as well, which is quite interesting.
Thank you for that. I think that's really interesting, because I always feel like that there is such a big conflict of interest, you know, that they, like, when they have this, you know, problem focused challenges or whatever, or solving a problem, they are very much, or my students at least, a lot of them are very much focused on basically still copying what they know from other classes, and they're copying what the traditional way of doing things. And this, though maybe like in a very like short-term way of thinking, maybe solve the problem very quickly, but when you go into long-term thinking, it doesn't solve it. It's just a short-term fix basically, and that is still kind of like a challenge to get the students there, and to really also, like, when they have conflicts of interest, because in reality in companies they're still like you know, like making profit and so on, and some things are maybe profitable but maybe not so good for the environment or for society. So how to deal with that? How can you teach students how they kind of deal with that dissonance in a way, that cognitive dissonance?
Yeah.
Sorry.
And in a way, thank you. No, your comments are very much aligned with what Benoit has posted, which is, it's we are noticing, or we are observing, or people are telling us that there is a need for raising awareness and changing mindsets and learning about specific approaches. It's not versus, I feel like now there's demands of, in order to tackle specific challenges, is that you also need to do all this in parallel. So that's very interesting.
Are there any other comments or questions from anyone who didn't have a chance to speak yet?
And we're particularly, because we haven't decided, or we're still trying to figure out how to communicate the tools. I mean, especially how to make this table useful for you, basically, for us who are in this field, also working in this area. What would be most useful? Because we don't want to create, there's so many toolkits out there. So the purpose is not to create another toolkit, but point to the resources that are out there. Like the Commission has created a tool, for example, on evaluating entrepreneurship courses. So we're pointing to that. I don't know if you have any thoughts or ideas on that. I know that we only have 15 minutes left, so we could, unless there's any, because I mean, I feel like we want to converse with you, or if you want to share any other challenges you face as educators, we welcome suggestions.
Yeah, I think G was raising the hand. Otherwise,
Peter just raised his hand. Yeah, Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things that I find a challenge in teaching innovation is the whole the arc of an innovation project, from scanning the horizon for interesting observations and to sort of honing in and converting some prosaic and generic observation into some kind of actionable insight. Students who are relatively inexperienced have a great deal of difficulty with this, of being able to identify an insight that resonates more than just an observation that's cliched. And I was just wondering, given that you've scanned all these tools, and have you come across anything? And in industry, I used to use a thing called the insight elevator, but you know, it's one thing to say there's a growing market for protein, or to say dining in is the new dining out, but to actually be able to squeeze that into something that resonates and can be leveraged into a new product or service or experience development. I'd love to find some tools around that.
Maybe just to understand better, are you talking about mapping different ideas so they are kind of digestible by different organizations, or do you have something else in mind?
No, I mean, so in a lot of cases in commercial innovation, it's either production-led, the company can make these things, or sometimes it's customer-led. But the ones that really sing are ones that are insight-led, that they have latched on to something that resonates with the consumer, that makes them think this organization really understands me, and that my life would be improved by the acquisition of this product or service. And so it's not mapping, it's more about testing, because generally you'll find in terms of the students, they'll just say, oh, people are traveling abroad more often, therefore they have an appetite for foreign food, or for, you know, but it's terribly generic and it would never stick in a so I was just wondering, there's a piece there, you've moved into sort of design thinking. So design thinking fosters that sort of deep, rich observation, like ethnographic observation, and that usually yields some insights, or often. But I was just wondering, that bit would be, it would be nice to see that included, or if you guys in your research. Now I'll go through your website and everything if you've come across anything that's useful.
Well, I mean, just a quick one on that, because Karina, I see you're raising your hand as well. I mean, not necessarily something completely radically new, but something that I'm also using in my own practice, inspired by lean startup and systematic kind of testing. So how do you somehow identify hypotheses? How do you design tests for them, and then follow up, let's say, a very evidence-based approach to systematically document everything that you learn, so you can actually compare your initial assumptions to the learnings that you have. So nothing which is radically new, but what I find quite a lot within the challenge-based learning spaces, or design thinking, or different labs, or even industries that are implementing those approaches, is basically the documentation process that doesn't work properly. So we do not document learnings that we kind of acquire once we conduct those tests with the users. I don't know if it answers your questions, maybe at least partially, but that's somehow one of my major learnings from that experience. Maybe Karina, I think, yeah.
Also just wanted to add another personal learning that probably links to your question, Peter, but also to a previous question, Heike, where you were asking for critical reflecting and how to make the students critical reflect what they have. This links to your question, Peter, because what I find myself in is having this feedback loops shorter and shorter. So as part of this immersive learning, bringing challenges to the students, challenges coming from the company to the students. And initially I found myself coming up with the company challenge and having the pitch at the end of the semester at the company. But now I find myself involving the companies much, much more often in order to bring in these feedback loops and feedback circles. And this is not only the customer who would basically be interested in bringing a new idea to the market, but also the user. And thus then finding the students balancing between the user needs and the real insights. Did we really come up with a real insight? So is it a real need that we're trying to solve? but then also bringing this real need to the company. Would you be interested in investing in solving this need? And so having these feedback loops between the students and the user and the customer much more often involved as part of the teaching. And this is what I find really interesting, seeing the reactions of the students, because now they actually start reflecting what they came up with. They're not trying to make myself happy anymore in order to get a grade, but they see that the users do or do not like their ideas, and they see whether the customer is willing to invest and bringing it to the market. And thus the feedback circles are much shorter than they've been a couple of months or years before.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karina. I think that's also maybe a thing of like, if you're talking about like innovation or sustainability, social or responsible innovation, you know, because I feel like as soon as you bring this like responsibility perspective into it, it's kind of like difficult. I don't know what your experience was that with the companies, but like they usually like, yeah, are profit driven, unfortunately. And then they like ideas maybe get rejected, and that kind of demotivates students then again, where they see, okay, well, I cannot make a change anyway, so why would I come up with something new then if that is rejected anyway in the current system? So this kind of systemic perspective also is missing, but that of course only applies to like social, sustainable and responsible innovation then.
Thanks, Heike. I think we have also one question of Peter.
And lots of comments. I don't know if you guys you want to comment on anything written in the chat. I'm trying to to catch up on that.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't agree. I couldn't agree more with the comments in the chat, for example, that people don't know what they don't know. What we are also trying to do here is bring in the, you know, resources from the Commission saying, you know, these are the lifelong competencies. These are what all the European citizens should have. And of course, creativity, innovation, entrepreneurship is at the center. You know, they are at the center of these lifelong skills or competencies. And then, and I know that Benoit also makes the point of like mixing creativity, entrepreneurship, innovation is confusing. Yes, and we are trying to actually point to the nuances of the term. I know at ESADE, for example, the MBAs, part of their first year course, they have to take creativity first, then innovation, and then entrepreneurship as 3 distinct subjects. So we're also trying to kind of clarify a little bit why maybe it does make sense to differentiate the 3 terms here. Let's see. Yeah, buzzwords, the point of the bad buzzwords, absolutely. And one of the buzzwords that we want to avoid is design thinking in our work. Maybe it's not a buzzword anymore. It's but we feel that there's a lot that that we could contribute, and a lot that is kind of invisible in the mainstream design thinking methodologies, perhaps. Olga?
No, I was just, given the time, was wondering if there are any other questions or comments. Yes, Franz.
Yes, I have a question. You were referring to a final conference of your project in Barcelona. And can you tell a little bit more about that? When is it expected? Is it open for?
Yeah.
Are there any costs involved? Where is it?
So the conference will be free. The conference will be free and hopefully hosted at the Union for the Mediterranean in Barcelona, and hopefully at the end of November. So these are the working, the kind of working dates that we have. We will post it on our website, and maybe we can make sure that you'll receive an invitation. personal invitation. But of course, everyone is welcome. And I think the aim is actually in that conference to have hard copies of the book and launch also this publication. Fingers crossed. Let's see.
And that conference might be also virtual, given that we don't know how things will evolve over the next month. So we are obviously planning Barcelona virtual, but we'll see.
I feel optimistic these days. I don't know. I had my first vaccination, so I think as people are vaccinated now, and I think it's more feasible now than, like, say, a year ago saying that. Let's see.
Europe is opening up. And I see at my University of Twente, that the students are very eager to meet each other on campus again. So we're starting up with new projects and programs and sessions, etc.
No, absolutely. I think everyone has a bit of a Zoom fatigue, no? After, I think it's almost 18 months or year and a half of virtual socializing, no? Right.
Although I expect it will always be part of the program, so a certain extent of virtuality, probably.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, one thing that, and we are reflecting on this quite a bit, is digital transformation that we've been talking about it for years has happened, no? Because of COVID, now everyone has had to be transformed digitally, our work and our teaching and everything. But I think now the question is, like, how do you strike the balance between the physical and the virtual worlds? I think that's a key question that we also hope to explore more ourselves.
And all your comments are, sorry, Michele?
No, go ahead.
No, just I was wondering, you mentioned, so I mean, all of you are coming from experience of teaching creativity or innovation or entrepreneurships, and you somehow gave us some practical thoughts. So if you feel like there are tools, again, or cases that you would like us to include, we would really would be very, very happy to do so. And for, then there are questions for inspirations. And somehow for the case studies, we're also opening an option. Like, if you do find a really nice case and you want us to reference your name, we would be happy to do so. So feel free to reach out, and we would love to discuss with you for this particular project, or even find ideas on how we can collaborate going forward.
Yeah, thanks, Olga. Conscious of time, I would skip to the last slide already, because we are already almost at the end. First of all, I would like to thank everybody for this very interesting discussion and for sharing your insights and feedback about what we have done so far in the project. And yeah, how to follow up with us. Yeah, if you're interested in getting maybe the book or working with us together for the successor of the Vision project, or getting on somehow of some kind of newsletter where you can get information about Vision events like the conference, but also podcasts and webinars, I would like to ask you to send your contact information to Lucia. This is the email address, byresearch@ispim.org. And and get in touch with us, and we would love to go on also with the discussions of today, and go more into details, maybe also in these events, or also in other meetings, if you'd like to follow up with us. So thanks.